Hello and welcome. In today's video, I'm going to share with you my top 10 favourite Ark tames. But just before we get into it, make sure to like and subscribe as it really does help out the channel. In at number 10 is the Crystal Wyvern. Now these things came out when Crystal Isles came out, and these things in my opinion are a lot better than the Wyvern in so many aspects. These things are by far much easier to tame, just requiring a passive tame using the crystals found on Crystal Isles. It is so simple, and it can even be your first tame on the map. And once you have one of these things tamed, they are insanely useful for so many things. They can pick up a wealth of different creatures, which really makes them very convenient. Their weight stat is very decent for metal harvesting when that comes later on. And also, these things have great speed and agility just for general travel around the map. And they deal a very reasonable amount of damage on top of that as well. Especially if you are going for the Blood Crystal Wyvern, which is definitely my preferred option. The Crystal Wyvern is a must-have on Crystal Isles, and it is accessible to every Ark player that has Ark, as Crystal Isles is obviously a free DLC. There is no reason why you should not tame a Crystal Wyvern. Its uses are just so good, and the fact that it's such an easy tame means this is one of the best creatures in Ark, in my opinion. In at number 9 is the Snow Owl. Now this is a creature also accessible to every Ark player out there, as this thing is available on maps like Fjorda, which I'm really thankful for, as a great creature in my opinion should be accessible to all of Ark's players. And it really does make the creature so much more useful if every Ark player can actually use the thing instead of the people that have just paid for the DLCs. Firstly, to do with the Snow Owl has an absolutely insane glide ability, which it also does share with the Griffin. And compared to the Griffin, it just feels so much smoother and snappier than any other flyer, and even the Griffin itself. But in terms of PvP use, these things have a wealth of great abilities for that too. Firstly, they have this kind of heat seeking ability, where they can seek out any Ark organism that is littered across the map. This is great if you think someone is trying to raid your base, or someone has raided your base and you've simply lost them. You can just activate this and quickly find them, then pick them up with the Snow Owl and dispose of them as you wish. But in terms of the Snow Owl, you're also going to want to crank that stamina, as their stamina equates to how long they can heal creatures for in that frozen healing state that they have. But just do really take into mind that this will heal every creature in the vicinity. It won't just heal your tamed creatures, which you should really take into mind, as sometimes that may not be what you want if you're trying to kill the enemy. So in that case, a Daedon would be much more useful for healing your creatures. Or if you have access on PC to mods, then mods could be a good solution for you as well if you are playing on single player worlds. In at number 8 is the Mantis. Now again, this creature is accessible on Ragnarok, which means every Ark player can tame this thing. And I would definitely say Ragnarok is the go-to map for taming this thing, as where they spawn on Ragnarok is a lot less harsh of a location than it is on Scorched Earth, and you do not need to kill death worms on Ragnarok in order to actually tame the Mantis. You can kill woolly rhinos as well if you would prefer, but both still do spawn on the map, so you can really pick and choose there. Once you have tamed the Mantis, which is a little bit laborious, requiring you to have a ghillie suit, bug repellent, and for you to passive feed it woolly rhino horns or those deathworm horns, you have yourself an insanely good harvester, and also a great boss creature for killing the Manticore on Scorched Earth as well. On Ragnarok, I will equip the swords onto this thing and just go ham on all of the overseers around the area and gather up all of that mutton, which is an extremely useful resource for just taming creatures, as sometimes I can't really be bothered with getting kibble, and mutton is the second best option, and it does keep a lot better than things like prime meat. And especially for me, having a mod for stacking, I really have no worries keeping all of that mutton. but sadly on official, mutton does not stack. Obviously, as you've seen here, the Mantis's main ability is wielding melee weapons. In at number 7 is the Argy or Argentavis, or as Squid says it, Argentavis. I will still never get over that minor mistake he made there. Either way, the Argentavis is an extremely useful creature that everyone again has access to, as this thing spawns on the island. So literally everyone has access to it, even mobile and Switch players that may not have access to all the free DLCs available. The Argentavis is by far one of the best creatures for gathering any kind of metal, as this thing has an insanely good weight stat, and it also has weight reduction on things like metal, crystal and obsidian. Also, the Argentavis can pick up a wealth of creatures as well, and if you pair this thing with an Anki that you have tamed, you can gather metal like never before. It really is an absolutely insane creature for getting all of that metal and all of those resources. Obviously, this thing can't harvest metal itself, but is an extremely useful tool in the metal gathering process. Also, on top of all of that, this thing has a wealth of other great abilities as well. Like, its saddle works as a portable smithy, which means if your metal weapons break while you're farming, you can just quickly repair it in the Argy. And also, they do regen insanely quickly when they eat a dead body. In at number 6 is the Carcharodontosaurus. Now, the Carcharodontosaurus is a very recent addition to Ark, and the Giga would have been in this spot. But the Carcharodontosaurus, in my opinion, is just so much of a better carnivore for the job that the Giga did, that the Giga does not warrant being on this list, in my opinion. But if you are thinking about taming a Giga, it doesn't mean the Giga is a bad creature. I still think the Giga is a very valid and viable creature for that need of a really strong carnivore. So if you have tamed a Giga, don't feel bad that you've tamed one. But the reason why I say the Carcharodontosaurus is so much better and so much more worth it is mainly its mobility. This thing's stamina doesn't suck like hell, and also this thing can move extremely fast compared to what the Giga has, which just means this creature is so much nicer to use than the Giga, as I'm not constantly frustrated that I've just run out of stamina. Also, when the Blood Rage ability is fully activated, this creature will be doing more damage than the Giga, but when the Blood Rage isn't activated, the Giga will do more damage than the Carcharodontosaurus. In terms of taming, this thing requires no tranks. It is simply a bit of a passive tame, and then it has a sort of mini game on top of that as well. You will need to feed it dead creatures until its taming bar above it goes green, and then you'll just need to absolutely decimate everything into land until that taming reaches 100%. In at number 5 is the Carnotaurus. Now, in my opinion, the Carno has always been the go-to creature for me, and I probably have a lot of bias since Squid's Ark series, where he tamed a Carno and named it Carny Dave. For me, back in those days of early Ark stages, the Carno was just the ultimate creature, as I couldn't even think of taming a Rex yet, and I didn't want something as low tier as a raptor, as I really didn't see any enjoyment in taming one. I just wanted to tame a Carno, as Squid tamed one, and they just looked so cool, and they had the power which I really needed at the time. Also, Carnotaurus, translated from Latin, means meatball, and that is why my first Carnotaurus I ever tamed, I called that thing Meatball, and the second one, in honor of Carny Dave, I called Carny Dave. I wasn't very original with namings back then, and at this point in my Ark journey, I will always name my Carno Meatball, and I rarely even name my dinos, so it is really special when I actually do name one of my creatures, as it means I'm really attached to that creature. But most of the creatures I tame, I don't even name. Also, since the TLC, the Carnotaurus is even better than ever before. Its second attack deals a wealth of bleed damage, which is an extremely useful thing to have on a carnivore. Not even the Rex has that. And also, its first attack in general just deals a very good amount of damage. The Carnotaurus is a very strong carnivore that doesn't seem to get stuck on things, as it is a very nice size, and it can be unlocked in the mid-level 50s. In at number 4 is the Rock Drake. Now, the Rock Drake is really an insane tame, which at some point, if you have access to tame one of these things, it is definitely worth it. But you'll 100% need to come prepared, as the Rock Drake is not a tame to be underestimated. You will certainly need some sort of creature to be able to get that egg out of the Rock Drake nest and deliver it back to your home safely. Also, you will need air conditioners. Don't even bother with torches, as the Rock Drake's egg temperature is so specific and so out of range of torches. You would just need so much to even get that egg incubating, so it really is not worth it. Just save up for the air conditioners, and once you have raised yourself this Rock Drake, you'll be glad that you actually spent all of that time preparing and getting a high level one, as these things are absolutely insane for so many things. Firstly, you can kind of call them flyers. Yes, they are gliders, but they can dash across the map with insane speed. And usually I prefer a glider over a flyer unless I'm traveling over really long distances on really flat pieces of ground. Like in the case of Crystal Isles, the Rock Drake isn't great as there aren't too many things to latch onto, but in the case of Arboration, that thing is littered with places to grab onto and latch onto, which makes the Rock Drake really useful. So on more traditional Ark maps, the Rock Drake may not be your best shout, as it doesn't have a wealth of things to grab onto, but it still can be very useful. And also, especially on Arboration, this thing is great for choosing through Rockrell with absolute ease. Definitely a strat you should try at some point. In at number 3 is the Shadow Mane. Now sadly this thing doesn't have a dossier, so that's why that picture was there instead of a dossier picture, but that doesn't mean Wildcard didn't care about this creature. Certainly not. The Shadow Mane is by far one of the best Ark creatures in the game, and it was introduced very recently, and luckily now can be found on maps like the Order, so it is accessible to people who didn't just buy Genesis Part 2, and I am so glad for it, as the Shadow Mane is by far one of the best Ark tames, having so much agility and also having a wealth of buffs on top of that. It has the hydration buff, it has the pack buff, it has alpha buffs, and also on top of all of that, it has the ability to go invisible as well, which really makes this creature an insane feat of Ark taming. Also, it's a great swimmer as well, but sadly this thing's taming method is an absolute hell to get through. The Shadow Mane may seem like a simple tame on paper, but trust me, you will struggle a lot through taming one, but you'll be glad that you did. In at number 2 is the Baryonyx. Now you may certainly not agree with this thing being so high on the list, but this is my top 10 creatures, not yours, and you can always feel free to comment your top 10 in the comments down below, as I'd really like to hear your thoughts on my picks and also what you generally use and what creatures you like as well. But the reason why I prefer the Baryonyx over the Shadow Mane is just I find myself using this creature so much more, and especially for caves I always find myself coming back to the Baryonyx and not using things like Shadow Manes for caves, as I'm just so much more used to using the Baryonyx and I like all of the features that it has. Sadly, this thing does not have the hydration buff, even though it would make sense if it did. Also, this thing does only eat fish, which can be a bit of an inconvenience, but really, coelacanths aren't that hard to kill, and I don't struggle with getting fish meat too much. Now, one of the main reasons why I use this is because of their spin ability, which you can access by pressing C on the keyboard. This only works on water, by the way, so sadly you cannot use this on land dinos, but in the water you can stun creatures up to the size of a megalodon, which really is overpowered, and it makes this thing great for doing underwater caves, especially considering this thing isn't an underwater creature and it is actually overall a very easy tame, and you really will not struggle with it, especially if you have the net gun. Otherwise, you'll just need to make a very basic stone trap. These things really aren't difficult to tame, maybe about 20 tranks for a level 150, or if in some cases it's a bit higher, maybe you'll go for 40 tranks. I'll always bring about 50, and you will certainly be good for the tame. And finally, in at number 1 is the Maywing. And again, like the Shadowmane, this thing doesn't have a dossier. What are you doing, Wildcard? How do you not have a dossier for these things yet? But that also doesn't mean, like the Shadowmane, that Wildcard didn't put so much care and attention into these creatures. And the Maywing is my favourite creature in Ark by far, and can be found on maps like Fjorda. The Maywing is just such an easy tame to get, and especially if you have a net gun, these things are by far some of the easiest tames in the game, just requiring a bit of meat and one simple net projectile with maybe about 20 to 30 tranks. These things couldn't tame any easier. Once tamed though, you've got yourself an insanely good glider, which in my opinion glides significantly better than the Rock Drake and significantly faster. Yes, it doesn't have some of those dashing abilities like the Rock Drake has, and it loses out in the damage department, but for travel and many other things, this thing is just so much better, especially if you are raising any kind of baby dinos, as this thing works as a portable feeding trough, and it can also steal enemy babies as well if you're into that in a PvP scenario. And actually, on top of all of that, they are great gatherers of berries as well. If the belly flop onto berries, they actually gather pretty well. The top 10 most legendary Ark tames. In at number 10, we have got ourselves the Crystal Wyvern, and this creature is here simply because, come on, it's the Crystal Wyvern. Compared to the normal Wyvern, I find it is just a much better creature, and it is so much better for me that I have to put it on the legendary creatures list. It's kind of a marvel, a miracle, if you will, that this creature is actually in the game. A Wyvern, and even a better version of the Wyvern that is significantly easier to tame than the normal Wyvern, and also just generally a lot less hassle on servers, as a lot less people tend to be on Crystal Isles than maps like Ragnarok. Ragnarok is actually the most popular Ark map out there, at least I'm still confident it is. I'm not sure where Fjorda is at, but I'm pretty sure Ragnarok is still the king. Also, on top of that, you might be saying, well, Wyvern spawn on Scorched Earth. Well, they're really just a pain on that map. Whereas on Crystal Isles with the Crystal Wyverns, you can simply just get the Primal Crystal, you knock out one of these things, and you can get the Primal Crystal from them, and then it'd be level 60, passive tame them, and boom, there you go. The personal favourite of mine is the Blood Crystal Wyvern. I just really like the abilities that it has. This is the Tropical Crystal Wyvern, but a lot of you out there in the comments below have been saying you really love the Ember Crystal Wyverns, and they definitely are a really good one as well. And if you've never tried out Crystal Wyvern before, if you're anti-Crystal Wyvern as well, really try one out for yourself. And if you've tried them loads and then you still hate them, then that is the only excusable excuse for not liking these things. Continuing on, we have got ourselves the Snow Owl. This creature can be found all across Extinction, and I think it can also be found on Fjorda as well, and it really is one of those gold stars. It gets a gold star from me, if you will. This creature is just so great in its density of abilities and its just general use. Like, PvP players can use this thing, PvE players can use it. It's not very one-sided. It's so versatile in all of its features. Namely, it is a glider, which means you can really rack up some serious speed with this thing. It does definitely help. Yes, Managamas have a lot of speed on them, but still, you can actually gather quite a significant amount of it with a creature like this. You're not really missing out too much. They can't quite get to the same speeds, but still, there's a lot more control I find in a creature like this, at least at my current skill level with flying Managamas. They also do kind of have a UV heat seeking. It's not UV, is it? It's infrared. It would be for heat. Either way, they have a infrared heat seeking ability where they can see heat coming off of any organism, and I'm not sure if just general hot things like lava show as well, but that should just be pretty obvious anyway. You can kind of use it like a night vision camera as well. Also, if you level up down on these things, not only can they fly longer distances, but you can also heal up creatures with them, which again is just going to make these things really nice to use. It is ideal to have a creature that can heal others in this way. Like, yes, the Daedon does definitely do a good job at healing creatures, but I find the Snow Owl just has it better. And also with Snow Owl pellets being useful for gadgets as well, to get some insane loot out of them, they really are so versatile, and you should definitely use one of the things
these things at some point, considering just how easy they are to tame. So a fan favourite of many at the moment, and obviously just ever since release. It's not really a trend thing. This has always been at the top of many lists ever since it was launched. I'm not actually sure when. It's a 2023 creature. It released some point in that time. I think later on in the year, but it could have been earlier on as well. Again, my mind is really not the most up to date with things like this. Time goes by so fast, doesn't it, really? And you look back at all these things and you're like, actually, when was that? Either way, the Rhinognatha can be found on the island and also the Lost Island, and I find on normal Ark these creatures are quite rare, whereas on ASA they're a lot more abundant. I don't know what it is. Is it just like how the spawns work, or is it just some kind of placebo where I'm just like, oh yeah, more are definitely spawning, when actually no more are spawning? I haven't really played much ASA anyway, so it's not that I've played more. Either way, looking on it, the Rhinognatha is an extremely strong tame which you can find in the swamp biome, and it really is going to be extremely useful for that job. Not only because they can deal heavy amounts of damage, but also they can pick up a large range of creatures as well. And on top of it, they're just heavily mobile flyers, which are really capable. They're really strong in what they do, and although their tame method is pretty much just a rehashing of the Reaper, it's still a really cool one to walk through. And now with the net gun and things like that, this tame actually does become quite a breeze. It's a lot harder, especially if you go for the 100% effectiveness. I find that not really to be the most useful on a creature like this. That's just my personal preference though, but you know, you might think differently. Comment your thoughts down below. Are you a pro 100% effectiveness on Rhinognathas or against it? Because it seems to me a lot more effort than it's worth, and they're really not that difficult to tame anyway. Just get yourself the highest level one that you can find and tame it. Just normally, you don't need the 100% effectiveness. If you have the resources at the time, then just go for it. You might as well. But you know, for me it's not really worth it because they're not really boss creatures, and they still really do pack a punch no matter the effectiveness. But it obviously does matter on the level. Some really low level ones tend to really lack in the health department. In at number 7, we have got ourselves the Argentavis. This creature is here, as for me it is just one of those kings. I can't live in Ark without an Argentavis in the map. Spawns all over the island and really is a popular one among many, including myself. It is so capable of gathering things like metal, crystal and obsidian, especially considering it has weight reduction on them. Obviously it's not going to be doing the gathering, but it's going to be doing all of the heavy lifting and the carrying. Obviously you can pair it with Nanki and a Dodic, and then you can gather all that metal, crystal, obsidian, stone, thatch, wood, even depending on what creatures you're using. So there's a lot of versatility you can get out of a creature like this. Also, people do give them a bit of a bad hit sometimes for their slowness, whereas actually I find they're not the slowest things out there, and especially considering that you've got a very high stamina and very high weight stats, they are a lot nicer to use than something like a Pteranodon in my opinion. Yes, they're not as fast, but you don't have to take as many breaks, especially if at the time you don't really have a very high level Pteranodon, because you tend to be taming lower level ones as they kind of first flies in the game, but obviously you will get some higher ones later on. But still, even with 150s, I find they're a bit lackluster in the stamina and weight department still, whereas the RGs really aren't, and you can really push with an RG. On top of that as well, their saddle does act as a portable smithy, which is just a really nice addition to have, and also a nice regen buff is gained if you kill something or if you just eat any general dead corpse. Now, I'm sure you all did expect this creature to be on the list, and yes, we have got ourselves the Shadowmane. This is just one of those creatures where it is so improved from something like the Thyla. It kind of seems a little bit mental why you'd still be using those, apart from their climbing ability and also just general accessibility. I'm not saying the Thyla doesn't have any use anymore. You can still definitely use it. It is a great creature. It's not like it's had all of its abilities stripped from it, but there's just less going for it now since this creature's been released. I know it's been released for a while, but still, you know, the Thyla's been around still for a lot longer than this thing. It is fast, agile, can go invisible, has the hydration buff, deals tons of damage, has natural armor, and no saddle is required. And although the tame method can be an absolute pain pretty much all of the time, they are really nice to have, and also they're pretty decent underwater as well, which you might not expect, but you also might expect considering their code name in the game is Lionfish Lion. So, you know, they better be good at swimming, and they definitely are. Really great boss creatures as well, and just general all-rounders. They've got the mobility, they've got the damage, they've got really everything going for them in a small carnivore. In at number 5, we have got the Bloodstalker, and I put this creature here as I find it is so useful for doing any kind of like underwater exploration. And I know you can get megalodons and mosas and basilos and all those creatures to be able to explore those underwater environments, but I find with a creature like this is the top tier one out there. I have found nothing better ever since I started using it. Firstly, you can skim over the top of the water, and also once in the water it has an incredible amount of speed, and you can see all the aggros of the creatures nearby as well, so it really does generally benefit you. And I'm not sure if it has the kind of neutral mode as well. I haven't actually used these things within the past week, and my brain is failing me because I've had some other musicy stuff going on, if you were wondering, by the way. Either way, these creatures incredibly great for underwater travel, but also just incredibly great for normal travel as well. They are so ideal for general travel as long as you have some kind of elevation in the area. It's not going to work on just flat plains, but they still do have a decent amount of speed in them walking, although it can be a little bit of a drag, and there's some better creatures out there just for walking across flat plains. You can find some creatures which will vastly excel compared to the Bloodstalker in that asset, but this has other uses. Also, on top of that, they actually aren't the worst damage dealers out there. You definitely wouldn't be bringing these things into boss fights. I'm not even sure if they're allowed into boss fights, probably not, considering their like grappling abilities all around, but they're not actually the worst damage dealers, and you can actually, if you get a high level one, deal some pretty decent damage to some enemies. You'd probably be surprised, actually. Now, I'm sure you expected the Desmodus to be on this list. Come on, it is the Desmodus after all. Probably my favourite, or second favourite glider, really, considering what's coming up next on the list, although that one does work slightly differently, as it's technically not a flyer, and although this does have the gliding ability, it's still a flyer, but it glides in a way. The next one is just generally a glider. It's not the Rock Drake. The Rock Drake is sadly not on this list. Sorry, it's not a legendary tame for me. I know it's a really great creature, but still, you know, it's not quite for me. Whereas the Desmodus definitely is. You've got Sanguinary Elixir. It's an absolute cheat for tames. Obviously, that gliding ability is going to warrant you tons of speed, which is really nice. Then go up onto walls and vertical surfaces, just like a Tapu Jara. They're much better than a Tapu Jara, by the way. Much more worth your time as well. The exact same tame method as the Bloodstalker, simply just get some blood bags and they will eat it out of your inventory, and boom, Desmodus. They do also need a saddle as well, but that's fine. Also, you get additional armor with the saddle anyway, so it's usually a good thing to have the saddle than to not. Also, on top of this as well, they can go invisible and pick players off riders too with absolute ease. In at number 3, we have got ourselves the Maywing, and this creature really did have to be here for me. Come on, it is that cute platypus glider which has an incredible amount of speed and incredible amount of use in the traveling aspects. They really are OP creatures for this, especially considering you can get them around the time that you'd be getting yourself a raptor. They are some of the most OP creatures considering how early on you can get them in the game, and if you have access to them, I implore you, please get yourself some Maywings and start training on them and get good at flying them. They might seem a little bit difficult and a little bit clunky, a little bit quirky at first, but trust me, once you get used to them, you are never going to want to turn back from these things. They are the ideals, and it's actually nice when you just transfer one onto your server in ASA. There's just a lot more that you can do on the island once you've got a Maywing on the map. Just travelling is so much easier. You thought Pteranodon was fast. Look at the Maywing. These things are absolute zoomers across the map. Not on the generation standard though, that's a different thing. Either way, also these things act as a portal feeding trough as well. Just great if you like your breeding. Also, these things can skim across the top of water, and they're pretty good barrier gatherers as well with that cute belly flop of theirs. Really useful, great legendary tames. In at number 2, we've got ourselves the Reaper. This creature has to be here for me. Come on, it's the Reaper. This invented that pretty weird and very innovative and interesting taming method that we all know and love from the Rhino Ganatha. Obviously, it's basically just a reskin of it, but essentially this is the creature that started it, and for me, it is so much more legendary. Just taming a Reaper for the first time is probably one of the coolest things that you can do in the game, especially if you do it on Operation. Or Gen 2 feels a little bit like a cheese because it's so easy, unless you obviously still do it the normal way, but still it just generally is easier because you've got flyers on that map and you've got gliders and all of those things. I know you have the Rockdrake on Operation, but still you're very limited for travelling creatures on that map, and they're so deep down under in the depths that it really does add a lot of good sense of progression once you actually finally get one of these things. And even once you tame one, or once you're impregnated by a Reaper Queen, you still got to come all the way back up into safety, and it's just such a long endeavour but such a fun one, and I definitely implore you to do it. Once you've got one as well, you can deal tons of damage. You feel on top of the world. These creatures are definitely well worth it. Yes, you've got Gigans and Crocodilosaurus, and they're legendary in their own way, but not as legendary as the 10 creatures on this list, and certainly not as legendary as the Reaper King. And finally, in at number 1, we've got ourselves the Deinonychus. This always tops the list for me. I don't know what it is about this creature, but I do, obviously. It's on here in at number 1 spot, and I'm going to talk about why I love it so much, but it's so interesting how this creature has really gripped me as an Ark player. Firstly, they've got tons of speed and mobility. It's insane actually how much speed you can get on these things, and they take no full damage, which is just really great for me. I know you can just dismount just before you hit the ground, but you lose a little bit of immersion there because obviously you wouldn't really be able to do that in real life. Just the smoothness and fluidity of not having to do that really does benefit you, and you can just absolutely tear creatures to shreds with the bleed ability, especially considering that you can grip onto them and do this as well. You can even do this to bosses, which is insane. You can shred through bosses so quickly, especially considering these things also have the pack buff. They really do have everything going for them apart from the hydration buff and underwater exploration, but you don't really need that for this creature. So yes, maybe it's not the perfect all-rounder, but there's no creature which really does fill all the assets, where you might say the Shadowmane does a similar thing. It lacks in the bleed ability, and it also does lack a climbing ability, which the Deinonychus has, and it also lacks the no full damage, and on top of that as well, they can't deal the bleed damage, obviously with the bleed ability, which the Deinonychus and the Thyla can, but the Thyla isn't even allowed into bosses, so we're going to outrule that one completely. So yes, the Deinonychus really is the most legendary creature for me. Very easy tames as well, and so worth it. Out of every creature in Ark, this is the one which I will be taming the most.
So thank you to my wonderful patrons Ekaterina Puchkova, Karina Thorne, Dominic Masajewski and Ethan Tapia, who have all supported me through Patreon or through YouTube memberships. If you want to join this list, then go join Patreon or YouTube members, but thanks to all of these guys.